Hi, I'm Neal Gittleman, Artistic Director and Conductor of your Dayton Philharmonic Orchestra. For the July 18th edition of Concert Night with the Dayton Philharmonic on Discover Classical, I was hoping to include not just one interview, but two interviews, one with our guest composer, Meira Warshauer, and one with guest guitarist, Almer Imamovich. As it turns out, though, it's a really long concert, and I couldn't even fit in a single interview. But ironically, that gave me the opportunity to interview both Meira and Almer at some length. And so I'm happy to share those interviews with you in this video form. I hope you enjoy them. So Meira Warshauer, it's so nice to talk to you. It's been a long time since we've seen each other face to face. But it's great to see you. And on this wonderful occasion when we are rebroadcasting the performances that we gave a long time ago of your symphony, Living, Breathing Earth. So welcome.
Thanks, Neal. It's great to be with you.
Often when I interview composers and performers, I basically just wing it. But for this one, because it has been, I think it was 2006 that we did that performance, or if not 2006, a similarly long ago time. I went back and listened to the piece a couple of days ago to refresh my memory. And it was so wonderful because not only is it a beautiful piece, but it was even more beautiful and wonderful than I remembered it. And I remembered it quite wonderfully. So how do you think about a piece of music like that many years after you write it?
Oh, this piece is, I mean, I can't speak in general. Each one has a different story, but this Symphony #1, I don't know if there's going to be a number.
That's a big thing in and of itself, Symphony #1.
I'm almost dropping the #1, but we'll see. Symphony Living, Breathing Earth. So it's so so central to my core values and everything I believe in, and it's gotten even more. I mean, the subject has gotten even more urgent. So it's held up in my. For me, it's like one of the highlights in my career. The piece, and of course, I made a CD which is available, and your performance was just kind of a pinnacle musically. And you had, and I don't know if you remember, you had in the audience, I mean, in the lobby, you had invited many environmental organizations, and they all had their tables and their.
That's right.
And their information, and you created this beautiful banner that was at either end, and I went home and framed it. And so I just, this piece is, I mean, I wanted to offer it to the world, and I'm so happy that WDPR is gonna broadcast it.
For people who are listening or watching, who may be taking this in before they hear the performance, can you give a little bit of the background to the piece? I mean, on the rebroadcast for Concert Night with the Dayton Philharmonic, you're actually on the recording giving a little introduction to the piece that you gave at the concert. But maybe for someone who doesn't hear that, can you explain where the piece came from and what you were trying to do with it?
Yeah, so I was trying to look at my old emails to do an archaeological search for when we first started talking about this collaboration, and involving two other orchestras, the South Carolina Philharmonic and the Western Piedmont Symphony, this consortium commission. And you all believed in me enough to just say, okay, you write a symphony and we'll play it. And I didn't even know what the symphony was going to be. I thought it was time to write a symphony. I'd written some shorter orchestra works, and it was time to write a symphony, and I didn't even know. And then I just kind of had this inkling of a texture, like an orchestral texture, like some kind of a busy, overlapping, layering, different rhythms, and just kind of very full texture. And one day I was outside my front porch in South Carolina, and I heard the cicadas with their overlapping layering, and that brought me in the direction of the earth. And I've been always an active environmentalist, and I kind of knew about global warming and that there was too much carbon dioxide and not enough oxygen being produced. And so I wanted to address that. And the living and breathing earth was just like this imbalance of we're not, our trees can't and the ocean can't give out enough oxygen to balance the carbon dioxide that we're giving, and we're suffocating as a planet. And so then I wanted to go to the Amazon, which is, when I was in 4th grade, we had I think geography, we studied Brazil. And there were these 2 characters, Juana and Bogana, and they lived in the Amazon, and they had a blowgun, and they was about whatever they ate in some kind of a pepper pot. And I was just so excited about hearing. I just
you wanted to
go see where they lived. Yeah. So I actually arranged to go with my family to the Amazon. And I think I got a grant from the South Carolina Arts Commission to do that. And there, the second movement was born. So the first movement was the Call of the Cicadas. And the second movement was this experience in the Amazon, Tawayo River at night. We stayed in the Tawayo River Lodge, and one day we went on a tributary to the Tawayo River is a tributary to the Amazon. One night we went on a magical canoe ride, and it was actually just a motorboat, but the motor died.
So it turned into a canoe.
Yeah, it turned into a rowboat, and it was such a blessing that the motor died, because
Absolutely.
I was like back looking up at them. There was so many stars. I guess there was not a full moon. It was so many stars, and then I just noticed all these fireflies all along the side, and then everything was reflected in the water, and it was unforgettable. And so that's how Tawayo River at night was implanted in me. And then on the same trip, as we were leaving the Amazon, and as we were leaving that way, we were passing on the shore. There was these swirls of yellow butterflies, and so that was another Amazon experience, the yellow butterflies, and that became Wings in Flight, the third movement, which segues into the last movement, which I called it the title "Living, Breathing Earth," because this was when I was at the Hambridge Center in Raven Gap, Georgia. It's an artist retreat center. And I had a very expansive view of the mountains and the meadow and the sun. I could see the sun, like it would change the colors and the shadows of the course of the day, the sun going, or us going around in our rotation around the sun. And I just wanted to picture the earth spinning in its orb, and all of those shadings as it goes around in its 24-hour cycle and its 12-month cycle. And so wanted just to get back to this cosmic view of our earth. And really around, I just looked up in 2006, I think your premiere was probably 2007. That's when the date of the broadcast
Yes, it was. That's right. It was. Yes, it was April 2007. I think.
And in 2006, Al Gore came out with his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, and in there, of course, we were all imprinted with the urgency. So that was while I think I was still finishing it, so with every spin of the earth, I was just feeling. What I wanted to accomplish in this symphony it's a love song for the earth, and also just a healing song for the earth. And I think I even mentioned in my program notes that, I could have written about devastation, but I wanted to write something that could be a testament to what we have. And so in the Jewish tradition, when we say healing prayers, or even in other traditions, sometimes we picture the person just in radiant health and good health and focus on that. And that's part of the intention of the prayer, is it should be a healing of body and spirit. And so this is It's still my prayer.
One of the things that strikes me about the piece, it struck me at the time and it struck me again hearing it all these years later, is that the texture of the music is so important in this piece. That's not to say that there are no melodies and there are no harmonies. There are melodies and harmonies, but in some ways, each movement has its own kind of sonic texture to it. And it struck me how, I mean, there are plenty of pieces of music out there that do that. But it's difficult to sustain that concept for a long period of time. I mean, even just the 5 or 6 or 7 minutes of a symphonic movement. And this symphony strikes me is that you really pulled it off. You wrote this piece that's about the texture of the sound, and it works, and it holds your attention and it holds your interest because the sounds are so fascinating. How'd you do that?
You know, this was also a little bit from the Hambridge Center. I thought you maybe were going to ask me why I didn't use concrete with the recording of the cicada.
The real sounds, yeah.
Yeah, and I did consider that because I did have a lot of recordings of that, and I learned from the cicadas.
But it's so much more fun to hear you turn an orchestra into a giant swarm of cicadas
exactly
than to actually hear the real thing.
That was my insight, that anybody could make a recording of the cicadas, but I have an orchestra, and let's just pretend that it's the giant cicada, and then you can bring in the trombones and the low brass and all of the percussion, and of course, and everybody can be part of making this giant kind of, I don't know what to call it,
symphony.
Activity.
It's a symphony.
Dating activity. But I studied the length of that. I think it was like a 28 or 30-second duration or something. I studied that, and I made that my phrasing, and I just kept being inspired by this notion of the energy of the cicadas. And every time I would be like working and I'm getting a little tired, and then the cicadas would start, and oh, okay, they're cheering me on.
A more philosophical question. So many people here in Dayton know that Brahms is my favorite composer. And as you know, Brahms had a thing about writing the words Symphony No. 1 on a piece of music, and took a very, very long time and many failed and diverted attempts before he wrote his first symphony. So when you wrote Living, Breathing Earth, was it a similar sort of thing for you in terms of, because you could have easily just called it Living, Breathing Earth and not called it a symphony. So was it an angst-filled decision, or was it, damn it, I should write a symphony now, so I'm going to do it?
When I wrote Jerusalem, Open Your Gates, which is a 3-movement work for orchestra, I could have been symphony, Jerusalem, Open Your Gates. I didn't feel at that time that I could call it a symphony. But I was getting comfortable with the symphony as a medium. And I felt the time had come in my career, we don't have forever, the time had come to say, okay, I'm going to write a symphony. And it was momentous for me to say that. It was.
So final question, which is funny because often in these interviews that I've been doing this summer, it's often the first question. How are you doing? What's your life been like in the COVID era? How have you been adjusting professionally to the stresses and challenges that we're all facing personally? And is everyone fine in your near and extended family?
Thank God, everybody's fine. We're at our beach house in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, which is such a blessing. I even went swimming this morning before breakfast.
Good for you.
It was kind of rough and a little rainy, but I didn't think it was going to clear up, so I wanted to get something in. So the ocean is my refuge. On the musical side, I thought Okay, I know we're not having performances, and I did have some performances actually that were going to happen. With the Long Bay Symphony was going to play Like Streams in the Desert, and Josh Jacobson was going to feature my music at a concert with the Zamir Chorale in Boston, and those were canceled and nothing else could crop up. So I spent some time making a website for my opera, Elijah's Violin. And so now I have elijahsviolin.com. I'm just
Great.
getting ready to send out an email about that. And I had started a string quartet. I really wanted to write a string quartet when this whole thing started, and I wanted to write. I was just feeling so much compassion was coming out for everyone who's suffering, and I started a string quartet, and then everything started to happen and blow up, and the whole thing with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, and I'm really getting involved in that. So, but it's just so much is happening, and I wanted to put it all in my string quartet, but I don't have a string quartet saying that they're ready to play my music, and it's kind of hard for me to do it without that. And I could ask, but who knows, what anybody can do when. So, but I probably will get back to that.
If you like, are you familiar with the Bayo String Quartet? It's a really cool string quartet that, they play everything, but they play a lot of contemporary music. It's sort of, the ringleader is a really interesting composer named Sean Newcomb. We premiered a violin concerto of his a couple of seasons back. And they're very adventurous, and they are working. They're in a big 4+ family member bubble. So I'd be happy to put you in touch with Sean, and maybe you'd have a string quartet to play your string quartet.
That would be wonderful.
Okay, I will do that. But that's what our life is like these days. We do what we can, and we try and think of ways to put music together and put people together. But it's also nice to look back to things from the past, like that performance of Living, Breathing Earth. So Meira, thank you so much for being with us on this interview, and we'll have it up on the website for people to look at and enjoy around hearing your piece.
Thank you so much, Neal. It's great to be with you.